Good afternoon, good evening. This is Doug Brunke calling from our headquarters in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm here with Melinda Trego, who will be a speaker today. And we actually have three amazing exporters that we're talking to today. They happen to all be women, which is cool. You don't always see that, but we're seeing it more and more, and we're real happy about that phenomenon. We've got three different speakers that have three totally different businesses, so you're going to hear some really interesting perspectives. I would like to say that we're now doing these Globinars once per week, so 4 to 5 per month. So we're really excited about that. For big companies, Melinda and I were just talking about big companies. I used to be in a big company, and my frustration there was I kind of felt alone as the global voice for my own individual business unit whenever I was in a business unit. And that's changed. The big companies, the multinationals, are more global. Some of them in the US have 80% revenue from outside the US, and that's an exciting development, and a lot more people have become global. The challenge, though, over the next 5, 10, 20 years is that the small and medium-sized companies often only have one person or a fraction of a person who is really kind of globally minded. And so what these Globinars are intended to do is help those companies, not just with the CEO, but others on the executive team and others in the organization, to learn about how to export, how to do international banking and legal. And we all can see what's happening with trade right now with the trade wars. There's things that need to be done for your business if you're involved with any of the products that are potentially going to be having tariffs. And so those are all really important things for any exporter to know. And I think what we're going to hear today is some really interesting stories and hopefully some tips for any company, small or big, to take away. Our first speaker is calling in from the Dallas metro area, Lynn James-Meyer. Lynn is the founder and CEO of BioSafe Technologies. Lynn, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing.
Sure. Well, BioSafe, yes, it was founded, incorporated in 2000, but the history really goes much earlier than that. In the early 90s, when I was part of a research team in Brazil, we formulated some non-toxic pesticides, which I brought back in the early 90s to the United States to bring file for patent protection. And also to begin clinical trials so that we could bring more credibility to the safety and efficacy of our products. And by the way, we were granted worldwide patents during that time period, 24 of them. And the process, beginning really, I went to the Small Business Development Center in my locality and got a wealth of information as far as whom to speak to about starting on a domestic marketing program and a little bit about exporting. But the Global Chamber at that time wasn't there, and it's there now, and it would have been a great resource for me then. But what really changed the tides for us was that we sent a sample of our head lice shampoo to a doctor at a university in the UK. And the UK was having, at that time, and still somewhat, a head lice epidemic, as was South Florida and a lot of other, several areas of the world. And he had written and published articles explaining how head lice had become resistant and more resistant to the pesticide products used for treating. And he was very anxious to find another product. And he had, when we sent him the sample, of course he was skeptical, but he came back immediately with just delight. He was absolutely taken away by our product and how wonderful it worked. And he continued testing and collaborated also with a research expert in Miami at the time, University of Miami. But where our exporting came into play was that he had companies calling him or contacting him for novel products that they wanted to put into their lines. And so they would reach out to him, do you have anything new? We're looking for something for head lice. And of course, he would send recommendations, our company as a recommendation. And it was one of those contacts that actually was the beginning of our exporting. We did contract with one company It was a little smaller than the ones we're working with now, and I'm glad because we were still a little green at exporting, but I had familiarized myself with freight forwarders and had one lined up, and we managed to set up a good contract. But of course, our finances, if business really took off or we wanted to add more distributors, it was very difficult. We had a small line of credit, but we realized the importance of meeting demand and being able to keep up with what the customers needed, or we could lose the business as fast as we gain it. And it was at that time that I was invited to an SBA conference in Dallas. And at that conference were representatives from the Import-Export Bank, the SBA, financial institutions, and risk consultant companies that help mitigate. They work with the Import-Export Bank in insuring receivables. And it worked well for us. And I'll just back up a little bit here, because the kind of contract I had to set up was where we had somewhat of an upfront payment, which was enough to cover our cost of goods so that we could supply and keep ourselves out of debt. And if we weren't paid, if the contract failed at the time, at least we could pay our debts and keep the company afloat. Not a great business model, but it was the way we had to start. And now this opportunity, which the most that resonated with me, because we already were exporting, was let's get this line of ours up and let's get some support on our receivables arriving and getting paid. And so we applied to the Ex-Im Bank. I was able to, because of the protections offered by having our receivables insured, I was able to get a very sizable line of credit. Banks felt more comfortable working with us because we had that extra protection. And at that point, our business started expanding, and it was a very timely event because we contracted with a very large pharmaceutical company, and all of the distributors that we had contracted with wanted the product in bulk, which is how we ship in 1,000-liter totes, finished material, and they manufacture putting it into their own private line, their own bottling. So we kind of avoided that packaging kind of liability. They took that on. Once they received the goods, it was theirs, and they packaged it. And of course, we had contractual points they had to follow and IP protections. So that's pretty much how we've gotten started, and we've been supplying internationally since 2004. We have never been late on a shipment. We have never missed an order. And there are issues I'll go into later, I'm sure, but I would like to you mentioned some tips. I have my little pad here, and before my time is up, I just want to mention a few points that I'd like to bring out that I've lived by. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Research every worthwhile opportunity that comes your way. I don't care how small that little crack of light looks, go for it. If it's there, it's for you. And look to the top experts for advice. Don't guess. And boy, you're loaded with experts at Global Chamber. You've got them at the government resources, the SBA, the Commerce. It's very fortunate. Always obtain legal advice when developing a contract. Make sure every protection you feel you need is in that contract, especially when IP is involved. And be certain you can meet the demand and be competitive with pricing, because no one is forcing that company to go outside of Europe, which is basically where we are, and buy from someone in the U.S., a small, maybe high-risk company, unless that product is darn good and the price is very competitive, because they will go for less quality and a better bottom line if they have to. And there is a black hole of time to be aware of when you're exporting. If you expect payment terms to follow suit for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever they are, there's still a black hole. When those goods leave the freight forwarder, go overseas, the boat's on the water. Nobody's going to pay you when they don't have their goods, and you can have 3 or 4 weeks pass by before you have a payment, and then you have your 30 days or 60 days kick in, and our distributors want 14 days to examine the goods and test that they meet quality standards. So there's where your line of credit, there's where that financial security, that backing comes in. Very important, but beware of the black, I call it a black hole. And listen to the various government programs, what they offer, and pick the one that resonates with you. And that is what I can offer for right now, but I'll be glad to answer some questions later. Thank you.
Those are great. That's great advice. Thank you very much.
You're
And we will encourage everybody, if you've got a question and you're watching, you can use the Q&A box, and anybody that's here can come up, or if you're shy, you can write it on a piece of paper, either one. Our next speaker is actually right here with me. It's Melinda Trego. She's with Eyetech Digital Systems, and she's a little bit younger in the exporting trade. And so she's got some other and different perspectives, and she's got a very different product, don't you?
Yes.
Tell us about your experience.
Okay, so Eyetech, I'm one of the co-founders and the Chief Operations Officer of Eyetech Digital Systems, and we provide eye tracking. We are a leader in eye tracking technology. We provide state-of-the-art software, hardware, and integration and consulting services for all things eye tracking, B2B. So about a little over 20 years ago when we started our business, it was a natural for us to export. It's a niche market, and we didn't ever really have a storefront, so exporting was really natural. We had customers from Europe starting out that needed our product for people with disabilities, and we started exporting. And there were some things over the years. About 50% of our sales have been from exports, and over the years I came up with 6 things that I thought of what would I wish that I had known then that I know now. And some of them Lynn has already touched on. One of them, I'll start with the most boring thing, and that is the legal issues. Lynn touched on this a little bit. I think if you are going to export, it would be ideal to start out with figuring out what your export compliance policies and procedures are going to be. You can consult a company to create that for you, but if you do, make sure that you are in sync with it, that you're happy with it, that you can follow those procedures and things that they outline for you. In part of those policies, you need to screen your new customers, who you're going to be shipping to, make sure that they're not on any blacklists. You also have to keep up with the laws of your country and make sure that you're following all the rules. And then also with your product, whatever your product is, we have an electronic product, and coding that product is a big deal because picking the right tariff code for that, it can make a difference as to whether or not you need a license and how you export that product. So it is important. You can get a consultant to help you with that, or you can figure it out on your own. We did most of the figuring out on our own with some consulting with experts and trying to use the resources that we had. The second item so the first one was legal, the second one is your product, and making sure that that is a global product, that you can meet the compliance issues that you have. And also we have an electronic product, so the power was an issue at one time. We found that in some countries the power wasn't as clean as what we were used to, so it's not just a matter of getting the right plug, but you also need to make sure you have the right filters if you have a sensitive electronic equipment. We also had somebody advise us once that we're in Arizona, it's dry. You need to make sure that you are corrosion resistant for when you ship to humid places. So look at your product and is it ready for the places that you want to go to. The third item is distribution and finding a good partner. We sell B2B, so finding the right person within the country that we want to go to was really key. And finding people, all of our partners are value-added distributors, so it was really important that we find the right people who can speak the language, they know how to fund the sale of your product, and they do marketing within those countries for us. Then there's the logistics issue. Lynn talked about getting the right freight company. We ship small packages. Our preference is that our customers give us their freight company or their logistics company in their account, but we still do use UPS as our main logistics supplier. And then I wanted to touch a little on the resources. So Global Chamber is a great resource. Put a plug in for them. But also within your metro areas in your state, there are a lot of resources. In Arizona, we have the Metro Phoenix Export Alliance. They have grants. We got a grant last year. It was great. They've also helped us to make contacts in other countries. Then we also use the Ex-Im Bank for export insurance. The last thing I want to touch a little bit on is ethics. And I guarantee that if you export, you will come across a time when you have a customer or somebody saying, no, this is the way we always do it. This is the way your competitor sells to us, and it's okay. And at the end of the day, you just need to be able to stand up and say, no, this is our policy. Go back to that first item that I touched on, your legal, setting up your processes and policies, set up your policies and feel comfortable with it and just do the right thing. Don't let people sway you. We've had times when, even with travel, when the customer said, oh no, don't worry about getting that other kind of visa. This one, it will be fine. People do it all the time. But we just say, no, you know what? We want to make sure our people come home. We want to make sure that we don't have any problems in the future. So we're going to do it right. And we're sorry that it's going to delay your installation or your product or whatever. So just do the right thing. And it really depends on your business plan, how you're going to export and whether it's essential to your company or whether it's an add-on, how you approach it. But I would say, like Lynn said, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to your community, whether it's Global Chamber or your state or your city may have programs that can help you, Small Business Administration and other areas. Don't be afraid to ask questions of anyone and do your research and go for it.
Fantastic, Melinda. Thank you very much. Yeah, the part of what we try to do is build a global community everywhere. So whether it's a city, county, province, countries always have some, what the U.S. Commercial Service in the U.S. or JETRO, COTRA in Japan and Korea, or MIDA for the Malaysia. So every country has that, and those are really important assets, and they typically collaborate with Global Chamber. So thank you. Could you just take a moment and explain your product?
Oh, sure.
And Lynn, in the Q&A, maybe you could say a little bit more. I think we got a little bit of a glimpse of what it might be, but if you could explain a little bit about what the product line is, that would be very helpful. What is it actually, this technical product that you have? So
our product is eye tracking technology, and we started out selling eye trackers. So it's a piece of hardware, it's lights and a camera. You attach it to your computer or a tablet, laptop, and it tracks your eye movements. And we started out selling to the severely disabled so they can use their eye movements to control their computer, an eye mouse, basically. Our company was actually the first company about little over 20 years ago that created a mouse replacement that you can use completely with your eyes. So, and we've grown from there. We've expanded out of the disability market. I mean, we still are in that market. That's our main market, but we are moving into some medical and other applications. People use eye tracking for research studies, psychological research, impairment testing. There are many applications in medical, in entertainment, gaming. There's even in driving automotive industries, there's companies that are looking at eye tracking, and it's a great training tool for, we've done a project with the TSA to train baggage screeners. So when they're looking at screens of all the baggage that goes by and you want to know, well, what are you looking at and how come you missed that thing that you should have caught, and they can tell where they've looked, and so that's what our tool, the eye tracker, does, all of that. And we sell to other companies who develop the sort of the end user software, the companies that develop the software that uses that technology to diagnose or to detect. Security, training are some big markets that we're in now.
That's awesome. And you're a co-founder.
I'm a co-founder.
So have you been involved with the whole 20 years then?
I have.
Okay, wow. So you started in elementary school. So that interesting product, interesting technology. Barbara, your product is right behind you. Barbara's zooming in from Brooklyn, New York, right? Tell us a little bit about your exporting experience.
Well, I started my business in 1999, and I design and sell very fine one-of-a-kind rugs. And yes, that's one of my designs there. And
Barbara, you're going to have to talk a little louder. Suddenly you became very quiet.
Okay. I started my company in 1999, and I design and sell one-of-a-kind, very fine rugs. And last month I received an award from the U.S. Commerce Department for export achievement for a small woman-owned business. And I feel that my product is very frivolous compared to what we just heard, but I did my first overseas show in 2004. I took my rugs to Heim Textile in Germany, and I was totally unprepared. I really didn't have a representative in Europe who could follow up. I didn't have a solid sales base in the United States, and I didn't have a totally reliable export manager to handle the freight. Nonetheless, I did manage to make a sale to a couple of guys from Capri in Italy. And they wanted to buy a bunch of rugs, and they didn't want to give a deposit. And the people around me said, oh, go for it. It's your first overseas sale. Right. So I had the sense to insure the shipment with the Export-Import Bank, thank God. And the goods were delivered, and they promptly disappeared, as did the payment. And so I lost only 10%. And I just can't urge you strongly enough to learn about the Ex-Im Bank and to work with them. So then what I did was I established my U.S. sales. I had a really good base so that I always had money in the bank that I could count on. I found a European rep in Paris, and for me that was really ideal because there are a lot of trade shows for the furniture and carpet business in Paris, and also Paris is so centrally located, and who doesn't want to go to Paris? So everybody goes there, and my reps have a couple of rugs, and they have about 20 samples, and they know my line very well. So it makes it great when I go to Europe for meetings. I don't have to drag along all of my samples or all of my rugs. And my first large overseas sale was to a chateau in Normandy in France. And I went over and I looked at the chateau. I had to take pictures of the existing carpeting and curtains. I went home and I did all of the planning. There were 24 rugs. There were carpets for the hallways, which were 155 feet long on 3 floors. And I did killams for the spiral staircases. So I had carpets manufactured in Nepal, Thailand, and India, and padding manufactured in the US. And my shipping manager coordinated everything. When the goods arrived at Le Havre, he put them in a truck. And when I got there for the installation, everything was waiting in the front hallway. And on my first trip, I had made contact with a French installer. And so I let him know the installation was coming up. We did the installation en français, and it worked out beautifully. And this brings up another important point. If you know a foreign language, this is so helpful. My French is not perfect, but it is serviceable. And I speak a little bit of Russian. And people are so appreciative when you can make that contact using even a bit of their language. So that's something that's really great to do. I had another wonderful project overseas for the Anjum Hotel in Mecca. And that one was a shipping challenge. The designer was Henrietta Spencer Churchill of London, and I was in the US. The clients are in Mecca, and only Muslims can go to Mecca. So we had to depend upon other people to do the measuring for us. And then when the rugs were ready, that was when I learned that in order to ship goods to Saudi Arabia, you have to have signatures from the Saudi Arabian embassy and from the U.S. Arab Chamber of Commerce. There are 3 U.S. Arab Chambers of Commerce, and the Saudi embassy does not make appointments to see people. So after I worked my way through the first 3 U.S. Arab chambers, and they were wrong, it occurred to me that maybe it would be a good idea to call up the U.S. Commercial Service, which had helped me so many times in the past. So I called up Anastasia Zenius, and she said, oh yeah, there's this guy in Reston, Virginia. You send him the invoice. He's Arab. He can get through to the Saudi embassy. He'll get you the stamp. He'll get you the commerce stamp. And that was it. As usual, all it took was a little bit of money and knowing the right person. So I have had tremendous help from the U.S. Commercial Service. I've taken their webinars, and I still take their webinars. And they also have something called Export University online, where you can learn about exporting. And at the present time, I'm having Skype meetings with potential clients and showrooms in Moscow. I paid for a search, which is only $1,250, much less expensive than doing the gold key search and going overseas to the country. So I'm meeting people by Skype, and I can gauge the interest. And so far, I've given out 2 quotations, one for a very small opening order, but the other for a 40-foot container of rugs. So if I see that there's a great response, then what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to do something like this, where people will come to the embassy, they'll have cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, and they'll see me on a screen, and we'll work long distance. And then if that time we see that there's really a lot of interest, I will go to Moscow and I will take samples, and I'll stay there for meetings. So it really helps a small business to lower their expenses if you use the kind of technology that we have today. I urge you to join the Global Chamber. I must admit it was relatively new to me, but it's another source for information. Your local library may also have a business librarian who can help you. And at the very least, it's a great way for you to research some potential clients. And finally, in my case, the state of New York has the Empire State Economic Development Corporation. I got 2 small grants from them last year, and I just got a grant last month for $25,000 to help pay for some of the overseas shows that I will be attending. And here again, they have experts who can give you advice. They can help you with marketing. In our case, we even have a representative in London who can help me find local representation. So I can do a lot of things really for free. And I think, as Lynn said, it's so important that you ask questions and get information before you start. But on the other hand, you shouldn't be afraid to take a chance. You know, I mean, yeah, my first sale didn't end up well. I didn't lose a bundle, lost, you know, only 10%. But by going to that show, while I was at the show, I sold every single rug to a hotel in Kazakhstan. So I didn't even have to bring anything home. So somewhere in Asia, there's a hotel with my rugs. And it's fun and it's exciting. And it's a way to give people overseas a chance to meet ordinary people like us, who have no axe to grind against different religions or cultures or whatever. And it's a great learning experience. You're really an ambassador for the United States, and you show people overseas what's best about us. So I really encourage you to give it a try.
That is a great way to end the first part of our presentation here. Very impressive. Thank you very much, Barbara. The chateau, by the way, how much was that worth for you at the end, that first big customer?
Well, I gave her excellent pricing, and the order was 100,000 net. But
Okay.
in terms of getting me business, that chateau was worth every penny of it, because you say, yes, and I did a chateau in Normandy, and and you know, I deal with very high net worth individuals. My clients own 5 homes, 7 homes, 10 homes, or I'm dealing with interior designers. And in my business, you really do have to be able to impress people with where your products are placed. So that first job was really worth the small margin that I took.
Fantastic. Which is harder working with, a Russian oligarch or the Trump organization?
That's a good one. I did a job at Trump Plaza. I did some of the hallways there, but I got a warning from the manager, and he said to me, you're a really nice small woman-owned business. You're a nice girl. And before you put that carpet in, get all your money first, or you will only get 50%. And I did give up a chance to make rugs for the White House. I had sold a $60,000 rug to a friend of the president's, and he came in, he was very excited. He said, how would you like to make rugs for the White House? And I said, will I get paid? And that was the end of the conversation. So administration, you never know.
So your experience with Russian oligarchs has been great.
Last year I did rugs for the home of one of the oligarchs, and that was a $220,000 installation here, but to somebody from overseas. But again, building on that, when I tell the designers in Russia who I've sold to here, they say, wow. And my first overseas sale to Russia was for 2 rugs for $125,000. And so, you know, you really do have to go where the money is. I always say, you know, I'm like Willie Sutton, the bank robber. And when they asked him why he robbed banks, he said, because that's where the money is. So yes, I go to places like Moscow. I've sold to oligarchs in Nigeria. I've done a beautiful job for the fourth wife of a Nigerian oil billionaire. So that's why I say if you export, it's great because you can go where the money is. Not to sound too crass.
And it sounds like you enjoy travel, and also you're a great ambassador. And your point about being an ambassador for your country, whatever country you have, is a significant thing.
I think it is so important, especially in these days when there's so much international tension. And when you go as an individual, people will be welcoming. I've gone to Arab countries and I've been treated beautifully. And if you treat people with respect, they're going to treat you well, and it will all go well, really.
I totally agree. Melinda or Lynn, do you have any follow-up things that you'd like to mention, given what you've heard through the conversation? Lynn, you should tell us a little bit more about your product, and then we'll get into some questions.
Well, you know, there is an aspect of my exporting that is a little more difficult than selling just a product that doesn't require some kind of registration. So in the beginning, I realized if I wanted to keep more control over my IP, I had to find some way to register the product so that the distributors wouldn't have to do more than necessary where they had to put their regulatory in place. So that made it a little challenging, but I did acquire a Class 1 medical device from the MHRA in the UK, which covered all of Europe for sales. And contractually, our customers our distributors had to take care of wherever they were sending product to or setting up sales for product to make sure they met the requirements of that country. And if some issue came up, contractually, we had this where information had to go that was touching our IP, that we would go ourselves individually to that government office and supply whatever information is needed. And we limited the countries to certain countries we felt comfortable doing that with, not a country where they wouldn't honor the IP no matter what you did. So we had to, you know, discriminate, you know, to decide where the places that were safer to go. And then another thing about the Exim Bank is they do credit checks for you on your distributors because they don't want to insure or offer their services to a high risk. So that's a great bonus, a great savings. So because of the regulatory climate and the types of products we have, it's limited us from developing other very good products. We right now have a head lice product on the market, non-toxic. It's very unique because it's also an excellent and glamorous cosmetic, and there's no poison in it. So it works. We have the clinical data to back how efficacious it is, but it also can be used as a regular shampoo as a preventative. So we've kind of hit something that is an unsolvable problem, because the biggest problem in that industry is how do you prevent an instant reinfestation? You might clear one, but how do you prevent that child from going back to school and getting instantly reinfested? So we have a system, you know, it's used as a family product, a regular cosmetic, several days a week, and not as a treatment application. And we've had it tested and it worked very successfully. So because we meet all these needs and it can be used as often as necessary because it's not toxic, it's a very unique product and very sought after. We've had challenges too from companies trying to to copy the product. Difficult for them to do because of a patent, but also because one of the major components, I had worked with the manufacturer, with a worldwide manufacturer of one of the key components that we use, and they reformulated it to meet certain specs for us and only sell it to us. So it's an extra kind of insurance policy there. So, you know, we have gone through a lot of different hurdles, and in 6 minutes it was hard for me to describe. But we do have unique form. We have a non-toxic insect repellent, and it's a matter now of the REACH climate, of the biocide climate, getting through regulatory hurdles, and that takes funding. And one issue we have is we're always reinvesting in research, and that has led us to actually, I'm the founder and CEO of BioSafe, but I'm also the founder and CEO of another company, Natureza Inc. Natureza meaning nature, it's a Portuguese word, because one of the some of the active ingredients that we brought back and using when they were researched further by our now scientific advisor, the original doctor from the University of Bristol, we found that they had profound qualities which have enabled us to get more worldwide patents now against with a product and formulations that will work against the horrible bacteria that are growing resistant to antibiotics. So the original research led to new research, another company, but we're still, in the US, we've also started more domestic selling because I partnered with a marketing person. But my major effort, and I've just been contacted by someone that wants to distribute in Ecuador. I'm doing some research on them. A lot of companies would want this product, but it's each country has their regulatory demands. Some are minor, some are major, and if they're major, who's going to work through the issue is usually you need to have someone in that country as your representative. How do you find someone you trust? And then our IP is at stake because, oh, I'll take your product and we'll put it into our line. We're globally the biggest there was one in Brazil, an animal product, and we'll do the registration. We'll do all that for you. Well, by the time you give them the IP information, they need to get the registration. You've lost your product. So with that, I don't know if I went and expounded on the question, but we do have a beautiful line of head lice products. So.
Thanks, Barbara. Sorry, I had to go get a chair.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I know, I guess if you're standing, we've had kind of some
That's all right.
But, that's just kind of where we've been. But the product is unique, and we have a spray for easier combing. We have a comb, but it's the heartbeat is the shampoo.
Very good. We've got 3 questions, and so get your questions in if you've got some. One of the questions is regarding your products and how you decide, once you have that initial product, how do you manage your products line? How do you decide to add new products and which markets to go to? What has been your process to manage that? Basically, both product line management and really marketing of your products. Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, are you talking, you've got 3 very distinct sort of product lines here.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
We try to stay abreast of, what is out there in the market, and it.
Do you have a product line manager?
We don't have a specific product line manager.
Okay.
We have our CTO and CEO is the co-founder, and he's kind of the one that says, I think we need to go in this direction, but we also listen to our engineers who are up on tech, and we keep an eye on the competition, although we don't try to reproduce what they're doing because we're a small company, and we have to stay focused on what we do. So we're always looking at what the next product is going to be, and I think being out there and having distributors in different countries, we get a lot of feedback other than what's just in our backyard, and that feedback kind of helps guide us into what directions we want to go next.
Okay, thank you very much. Lynn, how do you decide which products? You talked about how you've diversified into other areas.
Yes, well, our main, in exporting, we really have to go with the demands of the distributors that we have. And if they're a pharmaceutical company, it adds an extra layer, because if they want, and we constantly introduce other components, other SKUs in the line, and when we do, they'll look at it, but we have to have so much information in place, so many test studies, go through the whole REACH process, go through so many hurdles that if they feel they don't want to really consider it until we can hand them all that first, it limits the expansion of our line. And they have a line set up. They didn't develop a line around our product. Ours fit into theirs. So in the beginning, one of the distributors thought they wanted 2 different types of shampoos. And, when I introduced it, then another marketing person would come in and say, no, we don't really need that now. So I found that we could diversify our line more in the domestic market than I could overseas because of the requirements pharmaceutical companies have, which are much more strict than just selling, regular commodities that don't need special registrations. And I'm the one that basically has upgraded the formula. I watch to see and test it continuously. I've spent many hours at 3 in the morning watching lice react to our formula because I like to keep up with the more modern. I mean, there's no job description for me. There's none. But because I want to make sure that it continues to work as it should. And we can always back our claims with that kind of data. So it's a constant watch and update. And we have to be on our toes with that. So that's basically, and we've started also with internet, the .com kind of selling. And that can take us a little bit into global, but we're kind of going where we can easily be accepted and just get our own branding. We have our own branding in the U.S. known, and just work with whomever we feel can handle it overseas and working with us with regulatory. An advocate per country would be very welcome. If someone has a suggestion for finding one, it would be very helpful. We could have spread so much farther, worldwide.
That makes sense. Yeah, Barbara, in your case, I presume the inspiration has come out of your head, especially that first trip, and maybe now you do it by order. But tell us about how that's evolved.
Well, I think that Melissa said something really valuable. She said that has a small company, so she has to be very focused. And I think that that's the thing. When I started out, I actually sold drugs that I stocked. Drugs. That was an idea that I had, and I sold my. But what I realized was that if you have stock, you have to have a warehouse. In New York, it is killingly expensive to stock goods. And so I found my niche. And my niche is creating one-of-a-kind pieces. So to let people know what is possible, every 9 months to a year, I do a new collection. For example, at Decorex in September, I'll be showing a new Klimt collection. And every collection is very different. So people have a much better idea of my capabilities. But it's just to show people what I can do. And because I design especially for a given site, for that particular room or that particular building, everything is custom and nobody can shop me on the internet. If you want this rug, this is it. It's the only one. And somebody could try to knock it off, but it's not going to be this quality. So I think you just have to come up with your own niche. And I don't worry about what the color of the year is or what other people are selling. When people walk into my showroom, they generally say, I've never seen rugs before that look like yours. And I say, that's really good, because if you've seen this before, there's no sense in my doing it. Find your niche. And I just want to add one other thing that I forgot to say. Work with a global bank. I bank with Citibank, and that will make paying by wire transfer or receiving payments by wire transfer that much easier. It's great when you're overseas because a big bank will have branches all over the world that you can go to when you're overseas. And surprisingly enough, I have my own business banker at the bank. I mean, Citicorp is enormous. I'm like, a little gnat, but they come to my showroom to see what I do. They've given me lines of credit. They really support me. So don't think that because your business is little, that you need a bank that is little. It's the opposite. You need a big bank, and make sure that they know you. Thanks.
Maybe Barbara will, the next question, Barbara, probably would go to you because you've got the kind of the most unique product. It's in addition to managing the product line, how do you manage pricing? So in the case of both Melinda and Lynn, you've got to have global pricing and kind of manage that because people find out about what the pricing is. But in your case, Barbara, probably you can price at any point. So how do you make those choices?
Well, I do need price consistency because I do have the representative in Paris and I have a representative in Tokyo, although he hasn't really been too successful. I think that it's not the right product for Japan. And I do build in a little bit of cushion for currency fluctuations. I saw there was a question about currencies. And when I'm in Europe, I do sell in euros. And so I allow a 10% cushion so that if there's a fluctuation and I'm selling at one point and delivering at another point, because of course it takes time to make the rugs, I'm not going to get killed. In other cases, for example, when I sell to Russia, I sell in dollars. When I sell to Nigeria, I sell in dollars. So if I'm very comfortable selling in British pounds or the euro. For other currencies, I'm not that comfortable, and I ask for dollars. But what I do is, I think a lot of people really underprice their merchandise, especially in the beginning. And you have to look at how much of a discount you're going to have to give to your overseas client. If I sell to an overseas designer, he or she expects anywhere from 15 to 25% as a discount for me so that that margin goes to them. My representative has to have a margin. And I realize that I'm not going to make as much money by selling overseas as I do when I sell in the States. But then again, it's additional volume and I'm still making a decent margin. So sit down, look at all of your costs, and you should be able to figure out all of your costs. You should know how much it costs you to ship something overseas. And if you are shipping a product and you don't want to get killed by local duty and customs, you should be shipping CIF, cargo, insurance, and freight. I pay for the cost of the rug, I pay for insurance on the rugs while they're on the water, and I pay for the freight. But as soon as that plane touches down or that ship hits the harbor, those goods are no longer mine. And the local people will do the customs clearance and they will pay the duty. And what I did in the case of the chateau was I had my global shipping manager work with the client. So I still shipped CIF, but he helped her with the customs clearance and the duty and all of that overseas. You don't want to get stuck with those charges because you never know what they are. But just add in a cushion for currency fluctuation. Make sure that you're counting not just the cost of your product, but the amount of time that you've invested. If you're getting up at 3 a.m. to look at your lice, somebody's got to pay you for that time. So don't be afraid to ask for a little bit more. And if your quality is there and if your product is unique, people will pay. One last thought. When I go overseas and people look at my rugs, people from Iran look at my rugs and they always say the same two things. We can't believe your quality. We can't believe you're American, because unfortunately there's a perception that American goods sometimes don't come up to the quality of other countries' goods. And so when you're sending something overseas, send your best so that people will look at your goods and they'll say, wow, that's that's what America can supply for me. When I started, my suppliers were in America, and unfortunately, all of them have gone out of business. So that's why I use Thailand or sometimes India, and the knotted rugs were never made in America, so I've always had to source those for overseas. If I could source everything in this country, I would.
Fantastic, great answer. Melinda, Barbara touched on the point of the old saying, you know, sure, we underpriced it and we don't make any money, but we make it up in volume.
Right.
Not a good strategy. So how have you been able to manage that, price-wise?
Pricing, well, we've had a lot of pricing pressure recently in the disability market, and but it's a matter of making sure, like Barbara said, making sure you have room for your distributors, and we've had to adapt to some changes in the marketplace, and we have some direct competitors that we have to price around and price competitively with them. We do a lot of research on pricing, but we don't necessarily try to, we've decided we just don't want to get into this price war, because that's not, nobody wins, I think, when you start doing that. So we sell, we have a product, we believe in our product, and we price it where we can still make enough to research the next product, and also keep our distributors happy and keep the consumers buying what they need to. And it is a very, it's kind of a dance that you play.
That makes sense. We only have a couple more minutes. I do want to mention Terry in Salt Lake. You've mentioned powerup.com, productpowerup.com. I'm sorry. That's in Utah this September. If you're interested in a non-technical product show that are being exported, that's something, send your question into info@globalchamber.org and we'll be happy to answer it. A question from, maybe this will be our last question, because we talked about distributors. One question in from Larry in Washington, D.C. Have you considered licensing? You know, and so kind of the whole distribution, licensing, agent, direct conversation. How have you made that decision, and did you make the right one right from the get-go?
Well, mine is an art business, and so I really can't do licensing. I could have done that at the beginning. I have no interest in mass producing the rugs, because with my current model, what I can do is I get a 50% deposit at the time the order is placed, and the balance is due before the goods leave the factory. And because it's one of a kind, if you want it, you have to take those terms. So licensing is a possibility, but I just didn't want to produce that kind of product.
That makes sense. Lynn, probably you've considered that.
Lynn?
With us, it's a matter of them licensing the patent, really, so it involves a little more technical involvement with patent attorneys, IP attorneys. But we're in the process of licensing. But I found with the distributor, a very large one, they wanted to expand further worldwide, more rather than just be more in Europe and a few other outside countries. And they liked the idea of possibly licensing it and working out another kind of a pricing structure, maybe royalty, so that it would enable them a little more flexibility. And we're working with that right now, but it takes a while for a brand to prove itself with a distributor. And once they really realize what they have and they realize they don't want to try to compete with it with another product of their own, which we've been through that before, ours always seems to win out, then they kind of settle down and look at those options. But it really has to do more with whether they really want to expand and have more freedom and work pricing a little bit differently. Right now, we're also, as mentioned, we're paid in dollars, so they're taking the risk. And just in the other question, One of the incentives we have to increase volumes so that we can make more, because there is a limit to what they can sell that product for, our product for, or what will work with their model, is we offer incentives price-wise. If they buy certain volumes, the price goes down to them. But when you're taking payment in dollars, they're taking the currency risk. It's a little hard to start changing prices unless it really has to be. And then they want you to kind of show why, and did it go up at least 5% overall? And there's different measures there. So it's, I think whatever industry you're in, it depends upon whether you can just freely control pricing. If you have one unique product, you can do it. You have a little more control over it. So yes, licensing has come up, and it's a very good option. We in the beginning we weren't too sure about it, but now we think it would be a great thing to do. And as I mentioned, we're in the process.
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of our hour. We have more questions and we have more answers, I'm sure. So, but we're going to cut it here. And so, ladies, thank you each for speaking today. We see there on your right, Lynn, several awards. And I think what we heard today is that all of you have won multiple awards, and we can see why. You're all very talented. You've been through amazing journeys. You've got a lot of information and expertise in your heads, not only about your product, but how the world spins. And so thank you so much for sharing your insights. We will be posting a blog post about this roughly about a week from now, and we'll try to answer any additional questions through the speakers. Thank you all, and how about a round of applause for our speakers? You hear that applause from around the world. Thank you very much.